Most people know the name Norman Bates. They know the chilling silhouette in the shower and the haunting devotion of a son to his mother. But while Psycho was a masterpiece of fiction, the man who inspired it was very, very real. In 1957, a quiet town in Wisconsin was shaken by a discovery so disturbing it didn't just catch everyone's attention, it changed horror forever. At the center of it was Ed Gein, a man who, on the surface, seemed harmless, even forgettable. But behind that calm exterior was a reality no one could have imagined. Before we continue, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and let's dive into the boy who was never normal. Ed Gein was born on August 27, 1906, in La Crosse County, Wisconsin, but his life was never close to normal. He grew up on a quiet farm after his family moved there, a place meant to keep outside influence away. His father, George, was a violent alcoholic who regularly beat his sons, while his mother, Augusta, ruled the household with strict religious control. She believed the world was corrupt and often preached that all women were sinful and dangerous. Gein rarely left the farm except for school, and even there, he struggled to connect with others. Classmates remembered him as shy, distant, and prone to sudden, random laughter, as if he were caught up in thoughts no one else could hear. Despite doing fairly well in reading, he had no real friends, and any attempt to socialize was quickly shut down at home. Most of his time was spent doing chores, living in isolation, and absorbing the ideas his mother repeated daily. Over time, that isolation didn't just shape his personality, it began to distort how he saw the world. What looked like a quiet upbringing was slowly turning into something far more unsettling. But things didn't just stay strange, they started turning darker inside that isolated farm. For Ed, his mother wasn't just a parent, she was his entire world. Augusta didn't just guide her sons, she controlled how they thought, what they believed, and how they saw every person around them. She constantly warned that drinking, relationships, and even looking at women could lead straight to sin. Over time, those beliefs didn't just influence Ed, they became his reality. She kept both boys emotionally dependent, but as they grew older, a clear difference began to show. His brother Henry started pulling away, building his own life, and even planning a future with a woman. That independence created tension inside the home. Henry openly questioned their mother's harsh views, something Ed could not accept. To him, Augusta was not to be challenged. Instead of questioning her, Ed became more attached. He followed her words closely and shaped his thinking around her beliefs. The bond wasn't normal. It was intense, deeply personal, and controlling. While others moved forward in life, Ed stayed emotionally tied to her, unable to separate his identity from hers. That attachment kept growing stronger, quietly building into something far more dangerous beneath the surface. And then, the one person keeping that fragile balance alive suddenly disappeared. By 1944, the tension inside the family had reached a breaking point. On May 16th of that year, Ed and his brother Henry were burning vegetation on their property when the fire suddenly got out of control. The situation became serious enough that the local fire department had to step in. But by the end of the day, something didn't add up. Henry was missing. Ed reported him gone, and a search began using lanterns and flashlights. Henry's body was later found lying face down on the property. Officially, the cause of death was listed as asphyxiation, but there were details that didn't sit right. Henry had not been burned, and it appeared he had been dead for some time before he was found. There were also bruises on his head, suggesting something more than just an accident. Despite these signs, no proper investigation followed. There was no autopsy, and the case was quickly closed as an accident. No charges were ever filed, and life moved on, at least on the surface. With Henry gone, the household changed overnight. There was no longer anyone questioning Augusta, no one pushing back. It left Ed alone in a world that was becoming smaller, quieter, and far more controlled. With his brother gone, there was only one person left in Ed's world, and losing her would change everything. After Henry's death, life on the farm became even more isolated, but the real turning point came soon after. Augusta suffered a paralyzing stroke, leaving her unable to move or care for herself. From that moment, Ed devoted himself completely to her, taking care of her every need and staying by her side at all times. For him, this wasn't just duty, It was everything he had left. But her condition only got worse. After a second stroke, her health declined rapidly. And on December 29, 1945, she died at the age of 67. That moment didn't just leave Ed alone, it completely shattered him. In simple terms, he had lost his only friend and one true love. And he was absolutely alone in the world. After her death, the house changed in a strange way. Ed boarded up the rooms his mother used, including the living room and upstairs areas, keeping them exactly as they were. Those spaces remained untouched, almost frozen in time. Meanwhile, the rest of the house slowly fell into disorder. Now completely alone, something inside him began to shift. He later described it as a force building within him, something he could no longer ignore. And what came next wasn't grief. It was something far more disturbing. Not long after 1945, Ed's behaviour took a direction no one around him could see. Between 1947 and 1952, he later admitted to making as many as 40 nighttime visits to local graveyards. These weren't random trips. He targeted freshly buried middle-aged women who resembled his mother. He described these visits as happening in a dazed-like state, where he wasn't fully aware of what he was doing. On about 30 of those visits, he said he would suddenly come out of that state and leave without taking anything. But on other nights, he didn't walk away. He dug up graves and brought the bodies back to his home. He later confirmed stealing from 9 graves, and investigators were able to match several locations exactly as he described them. Inside his home, he began using parts of those bodies to create items, trying to hold on to something he had lost. He even admitted to attempting to create a woman's suit so that he could become his mother, to literally crawl into her skin. This wasn't about hiding anymore, it was a pattern repeated over years, growing more intense each time. But eventually digging up the dead wasn't enough anymore. By the mid-1950s, the pattern shifted. This time, it wasn't about graves. It was about real people. On December 8, 1954, a tavern owner named Mary Hogan disappeared without a trace. For years, there were no clear answers. Then, everything changed in 1957. On the morning of November 16, 1957, 58-year-old hardware store owner Bernice Worden vanished from her shop in Plainfield. The last known activity inside that store was a simple purchase, a gallon of antifreeze. That receipt turned out to be the final one she ever wrote. It also led directly to Ed. He had been in the store the night before and was expected to return that morning. Later that evening, he was arrested at a grocery store in West Plainfield. What seemed like a missing person case quickly became something far more serious. During questioning, he admitted to shooting Mary Hogan and later confirmed details tied to Worden's disappearance. The timeline, the receipt, and his presence at the store all connected in a way that couldn't be ignored. For the first time, the quiet man from the farm was no longer invisible. Everything was about to be uncovered, and when police finally stepped onto his property, they weren't prepared for what they were about to see. When officers searched Ed's farm in 1957, what they found inside didn't resemble anything ordinary. In a shed on the property, Bernice Worden's body was discovered, confirming the fears surrounding her disappearance. But that was only the beginning. Inside the house, the scene became even more disturbing. Authorities found whole human bones and fragments scattered throughout. There were chairs covered in human skin, bowls made from skulls, and skulls mounted on bedposts. Masks made from the skin of female heads were also recovered, along with items crafted from different body parts. A lampshade made from a human face and a belt made from human skin were among the objects documented. There were also personal remains connected to his victims. Mary Hogan's skull was found inside the house, and Bernice Worden's head and heart were recovered from the property. Altogether, the items revealed a pattern that had been building over years. What stood out the most was the contrast. While the rest of the house was in disorder, one area remained untouched. His mother's room preserved exactly as it had been. At this point, this wasn't just a crime scene anymore. It was something far beyond anything the town had ever seen. After his arrest in 1957, the case moved from shock to understanding what was happening inside his mind. Ed Gein was diagnosed with schizophrenia and was initially found unfit to stand trial. He was sent to a mental institution where he remained for years before being declared competent in 1968. His trial began on November the 7th, 1968, and lasted 1 week. He was found guilty of the murder of Bernice Worden, but the court also ruled him legally insane. Instead of prison, he was sent back to a psychiatric institution where he spent the rest of his life. He died on July 26, 1984, at the age of 77 due to respiratory failure linked to lung cancer. Even after his death, the impact of his story didn't fade. It spread into popular culture and shaped some of the most well-known horror stories ever created. Characters like Norman Bates and films like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and The Silence of the Lambs drew inspiration from his case. What started in a quiet town didn't stay there. It became something far bigger, something that still lingers today, because even after his death, his story never really disappeared. Some stories don't end when the case is closed. This one left behind questions that still feel unsettling even today. A man who lived quietly, worked simple jobs, and blended into a small town carried something far darker beneath the surface. His actions forced people to confront how deeply the human mind can break when isolation and obsession take over. Even now, his story feels less like history and more like a warning. Do you think this could have been prevented if someone had noticed the signs earlier? Or was this outcome unavoidable from the very beginning? Drop your thoughts below in the comments if you noticed something different. Before you leave, if you enjoy real crime stories like this, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching.